Sandra's live TV confession that changed everything. The moment the cameras turned on, something strange filled the air. Millions were watching from around the world, waiting for a normal interview, but no one knew that Sandra Bullock had decided to say something that would shake the internet. Keanu Reeves sat beside her, calm as always, his gentle smile hiding the storms he had walked through in life. He didn't expect anything unusual. He thought it would be another simple conversation, another routine interview. But Sandra kept glancing at him with a quiet intensity, like she had been holding onto a truth for years, and tonight she was finally ready to release it. And as the host asked her a casual question about Keanu, Sandra took a breath that made the entire studio go silent. She said in a soft voice, almost trembling, "If people really knew what he has done off camera, they would never stop talking about him." The audience froze. Keanu's eyebrows lifted just slightly, not in fear but confusion, as if he was trying to remember what she could possibly be referring to. Sandra looked at him with eyes full of a complicated mixture of admiration, sadness, and something deeper that even the cameras couldn't fully capture. Keanu felt the heat of the lights on his skin, but the coldness in his chest spread slowly, warning him that something heavy was coming. He wasn't used to people speaking about him so directly. He preferred silence, privacy, shadows where kindness was never announced but simply done. And to make it even more intense, the host leaned forward and whispered, "Sandra, are you saying there are things the world doesn't know about Keanu?" Sandra nodded slowly. The room changed. It felt like time paused. You could hear the faint buzz of a camera lens adjusting. Keanu's hands rested together, fingers interlocked, steady as always, but inside him there was a small tremor, the kind he never showed. He had spent many years helping others quietly, walking away before anyone could thank him, carrying grief on his back without asking for sympathy. He never expected someone like Sandra to pull those hidden stories into the light. Sandra continued, her voice even softer now. "I never said this before because I knew he would hate the attention, but some truths deserve to be spoken. People should know what real kindness looks like, especially in a world like ours." Keanu felt his heart beat a little faster. He opened his mouth as if to interrupt, to shake his head, to change the subject, but something in her eyes told him not to. For once, maybe it was time to let someone else speak. Then she said it, the words that made millions around the world stop breathing for a moment. "There was a day I was going through something so painful, something I never talked about publicly, and he showed up for me in a way that saved me." The audience gasped. The host's eyes widened. Keanu stared at her, stunned. He didn't expect her to bring that moment back. That day was years ago, a day Sandra had cried behind a locked door. A day when he had simply knocked without knowing why, his voice gentle, offering nothing but presence. Keanu whispered, barely audible, "Sandra, you don't have to." She smiled gently and replied, "I know, but I want to." And just like that, the world leaned in closer. This was only the beginning. The studio lights dimmed just a little, and everyone could feel something powerful rising between Keanu and Sandra. The interview was no longer entertainment. It was turning into a confession, a truth that had waited years to find a voice. The cameras zoomed in without being told, sensing the tension in the air. Sandra took a slow breath, and her hands trembled slightly as they rested on her lap. The audience wasn't making a sound now. They were frozen, as if afraid that the smallest noise would break the fragile moment. Sandra's voice trembled when she spoke again. "There was a time when I felt like my world was falling apart. I was trying to smile in front of cameras, trying to pretend everything was fine, but inside I was breaking. Nobody knew, nobody even noticed, but he did." She turned to Keanu, and the look she gave him made the host lean back, almost uncomfortable but deeply curious. Keanu swallowed gently, his eyes dropping for a moment. He remembered. He remembered the hallway, the quiet door, the soft sound of someone trying not to cry. He didn't know who it was at first. He only felt something inside him whispering that someone needed kindness. Sandra continued, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't tell anyone I was struggling. I was afraid of looking weak. I was afraid people would think I wasn't strong enough. But that day, I couldn't carry it anymore. I hid in a dressing room and stayed there for hours. I thought no one would ever notice if I disappeared for a while." The silence grew heavier. Millions of viewers leaned closer to their screens, feeling her pain like it was their own. She looked at Keanu with gratitude so deep that even the audience felt it. "But you knocked on the door," she said softly. "You didn't say much. You didn't ask me embarrassing questions. You didn't try to fix me. You just sat outside that door and said, 'I'm here if you want company. If not, I will stay here quietly.' And you stayed." Keanu's breath caught for a moment. He never expected her to remember the exact words. The host blinked, stunned. The audience began tearing up. This wasn't a dramatic story made for TV. It was something real, something raw, and the world was finally hearing it. Keanu spoke for the first time with a gentle tone that made everyone lean in. "I didn't do anything special," he said quietly. "I just didn't want you to feel alone." Sandra smiled sadly. "But that's the thing, Keanu. You think it was nothing. But for me, it kept me from falling apart completely. You didn't know it, but at that moment, I felt like life had taken everything away from me. I was hurting in a way I didn't know how to explain, and you just by sitting there gave me the strength to stand up again." Keanu lowered his eyes, feeling that familiar discomfort when someone praised him. He never liked attention. He preferred silence, shadows, and kindness that didn't need to be seen. But tonight, the truth refused to stay hidden. Then suddenly, the host asked a question that made everyone gasp. "Keanu, did you know your small act changed her life that day?" Keanu's eyes widened slowly. He didn't know, and before he could answer, Sandra reached out and touched his hand gently. "He had no idea," she said softly, "but tonight I want him to know." The room fell completely silent. This story was only getting deeper. The audience barely breathed as Sandra's fingers rested lightly on Keanu's hand. Her touch wasn't romantic. It was something deeper, something made of memories, gratitude, pain, and years of carrying a truth she never shared. Keanu looked down at their hands, unsure if he should pull away or hold still. He wasn't used to being the center of emotional conversations. He preferred helping quietly and disappearing before anyone could say thank you. But tonight, there was no place to hide. The host sensed something huge coming and leaned forward. "Sandra, you said that moment changed your life. How?" The question cut through the quiet, and Sandra closed her eyes briefly, as if searching for courage inside herself. When she opened them again, her voice was softer, more honest than ever. "After that day," she began, "I went home and wrote a letter. I wrote it to Keanu." Keanu's head snapped up, surprise flashing in his eyes. He whispered, "A letter?" Sandra nodded slowly. "Yes, but I never gave it to you." The audience gasped. Even the cameras shifted closer. Keanu stared at her, confused and concerned. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sandra took a shaky breath. "Because I didn't know how. I felt weak for breaking down that day. I felt embarrassed. I thought if I told you how much you helped me, you would think I was too emotional." Her voice broke a little, but she didn't stop. "So I folded the letter and hid it in a drawer, but I never forgot what I wrote." Keanu frowned gently. He never wanted anyone to feel ashamed of their pain, especially not someone he respected so much. "You didn't have to hide anything," he said quietly. "We all carry heavy things. You don't have to pretend with me." Sandra swallowed, her eyes slightly shiny with emotion. "I know that now, but back then I didn't, and what I wrote in that letter was something I didn't have the courage to say out loud." The host sensed the emotional weight and asked gently, "Sandra, what did the letter say?" She looked down at her hands. Her voice trembled. "I wrote that I didn't know if I would have made it through that day without Keanu's kindness. I wrote that I was at the lowest point of my life and he didn't even know. I wrote that he showed me what real care looks like." Keanu felt a sharp ache in his chest, the kind that comes from hearing someone's hidden pain. But then Sandra said something that made the entire studio freeze. "I also wrote that some people save lives without ever realizing it." The words were so soft, yet so powerful that even the host went silent. Keanu blinked, stunned. He had helped many people quietly, but he never imagined he had saved someone's life emotionally. He opened his mouth, trying to speak, but before he could form the words, Sandra reached into her jacket slowly. The audience leaned forward so hard it felt like the room tilted. Sandra pulled out a small, folded envelope, old and worn around the edges. Keanu stared at it, his heart thudded hard. She whispered, "This is the letter. I kept it with me all these years, and tonight, I think it's time you heard what I wrote." Keanu's breath caught. The world held still. The envelope in Sandra's hand looked small, but the weight inside it felt huge. The audience stared at it like it was a secret treasure, something powerful enough to change the way millions saw Keanu Reeves. Keanu's heartbeat slowed and then sped up again, like his mind couldn't decide how to feel. He had always lived quietly, choosing kindness in shadows, never expecting thanks or attention. But now his past kindness was standing in front of him, written in the fragile handwriting of someone he once helped without even knowing how deeply she had needed it. Sandra held the letter carefully, as if afraid it would crumble. "I never thought I would read this out loud," she whispered, "but you deserve to know the truth." Keanu's fingers curled gently together. He wasn't afraid of the letter. He was afraid of hurting Sandra again, even by accident. "You don't have to," he said softly, giving her an out. "If it is painful, you can let it stay in the past." Sandra shook her head slowly. "No, this part of my past only feels heavy because I kept it hidden. Maybe sharing it will make it lighter." The cameras zoomed in, capturing the way her eyelashes trembled as she unfolded the paper, its edges yellowing with time. The host swallowed hard, trying not to interrupt the fragile moment. The audience leaned forward, breaths held. Sandra began reading, her voice soft but steady. "Dear Keanu, you don't know what today meant to me. I don't think you ever will. I was drowning inside myself. I was losing the strength to pretend I was okay. And then you knocked." Keanu closed his eyes briefly. Hearing her pain written in her own handwriting felt like a punch to the heart. She continued, "I don't think you realize how rare your kindness is. You didn't ask me to be strong, you didn't rush me, you didn't tell me to smile. You just sat there being a quiet light when everything inside me felt dark." The audience wiped tears. Even the host's eyes softened. Keanu looked at her with an expression that held guilt, warmth, and quiet sorrow all at once. Sandra swallowed and kept reading. "I don't know if I will ever tell you how deeply this moment mattered. Maybe I will never have the courage. Maybe I will hide behind laughter and jokes the next time I see you. But I want you to know this truth even if you never read it. Some people save others through big actions. You saved me by simply showing up." Sandra lowered the letter, her voice breaking on the final line. "And I wrote, 'Thank you for giving me a reason to breathe again.'" The studio fell into a silence so deep it felt like the whole world stopped moving. Keanu stared at her, stunned, his eyes glistening. He opened his mouth to speak, but emotions choked his voice for the first time in years. Finally, in a soft voice full of pain and gentleness, he whispered, "I had no idea you were hurting like that. I would have stayed longer. I would have done more. I never wanted you to face anything alone." Sandra shook her head quickly. "You did enough. You did more than enough. You were the one person who saw me when the world didn't." Keanu looked down, a tear slipping down his cheek. The entire studio gasped. Keanu rarely cried, especially not in public, but this moment was different. This was truth meeting truth. This was healing. Before anyone could speak again, the host asked softly, "Keanu, how does it feel to finally hear her words?" Keanu lifted his head slowly, and the answer he gave sent chills through the room. "It feels like I am hearing a moment I forgot, but she carried it for years." And with that, something new began to unfold between them. The studio was frozen in shock. Keanu's quiet tears had changed the entire atmosphere. This was not a celebrity interview anymore. It felt like two souls finally sharing a truth they had both kept buried for years. The audience didn't move. The host didn't breathe. Even the cameras seemed to settle into stillness, capturing the raw emotion between them. Keanu wiped his cheeks slowly, almost surprised by his own tears, and looked at Sandra with a softness that made millions lean closer to their screens. "I never thought anyone remembered that day," he whispered. "I always hoped you were okay after that, but I didn't want to ask and make you uncomfortable." Sandra nodded gently. "You didn't ask because you respect people's pain. You let them speak when they are ready. That's rare. That's why I kept this letter. You made me feel safe without knowing it." Keanu lowered his gaze, struggling with emotions he usually kept locked away. All his life, he had been the one who listened, the one who lifted others quietly, the one who gave without expecting anything. But hearing that his smallest act had saved someone from falling deeper into loneliness felt heavier than he expected. He never wanted to be seen as a hero. He only wanted to be human. The host cleared his throat softly. "Keanu, the world knows you are humble. But did you ever imagine your kindness had this kind of impact on someone you care about?" Keanu shook his head slowly. "No, I never think that way. I just try to be there when someone needs presence. Sometimes just sitting near someone is enough. Sometimes silence is the best help." He paused. "I didn't know it mattered this much." Sandra's voice softened even more. "It mattered because no one else noticed. I was smiling for cameras, doing interviews, laughing at jokes. But you were the only one who saw the real me that day." She looked at him deeply. "You noticed something was wrong even when I tried to hide it." Keanu let out a slow breath. "Sometimes hurt has a silent sound," he said quietly. "You learn to hear it when you've lived through your own pain." The entire audience felt that sentence like a punch to the chest. Sandra reached out again, squeezing his hand, but this time not out of pain, but understanding. "I never forgot that moment," she whispered. And I think it's time the world knows why. The host blinked, unsure. Why? He asked softly. Sandra turned to the camera with a calm determination. Because people think kindness is small. People think it doesn't matter, but it does. One quiet moment from Keanu gave me back my strength. It reminded me that I wasn't alone, and maybe someone watching right now needs to hear that too. Keanu looked at her with surprise, gratitude, and a silent respect that filled the room. He didn't like being praised, but this wasn't praise. This was truth, and truth, he knew, was sometimes meant to be shared. But before the host could move to the next segment, something unexpected happened. A producer hurried onto the stage, whispering something into the host's ear. The host's expression changed instantly from calm to shocked. He straightened in his chair and looked at Keanu with wide, almost disbelieving eyes. Keanu, there is someone backstage who asked to speak to you, someone connected to that day. Keanu froze, Sandra's eyes widened. The host continued, and they said they have something important to reveal, something about you. The world held its breath. A new truth was about to surface. Keanu's heart thudded slowly as the host's words echoed through the studio. Someone backstage, someone connected to that painful day, someone who wanted to reveal something about him. Keanu didn't fear many things in life, but unexpected attention always made his chest tighten. He glanced at Sandra, who looked equally anxious. The audience leaned forward like a wave moving toward the shore, waiting for the unseen person to step into the light. The host gave a small nod to the side of the stage, and the curtain shifted. Footsteps approached, soft but full of weight. Then a woman walked slowly into the studio. She looked nervous, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes searching for courage. She was not famous. She was not someone the viewers recognized. She was just a quiet, ordinary person who carried an extraordinary truth. Keanu's eyes softened instantly as he tried to place her face. She looked familiar in a distant, almost forgotten way. She gave him a small, emotional smile. "Hello, Keanu," she whispered. "It's been many years." He tilted his head, searching his memory. Then suddenly something clicked in his heart, a memory almost hidden. "You were in that hallway too," he said softly. Sandra's eyes widened in surprise. The woman nodded. "Yes, I was working backstage that day. I was the one who first saw Sandra run into the dressing room. I was about to follow her because she looked heartbroken, but you reached the door before I could." The audience gasped quietly. Sandra covered her mouth, remembering flashes of that day. The woman continued, her voice trembling. "I didn't know what to do. I wanted to help her. I wanted to check if she was okay, but you stopped me and said, 'Give her a moment. She needs breathing space, not pressure.'" Keanu closed his eyes, remembering the exact moment, remembering the look of worry on the woman's face. "But that's not the part I came here to talk about," the woman said with tears rising. "After you sat by the door, I watched you." Keanu looked confused. "Me," he whispered. The woman nodded. "Yes, I watched you sit there for over an hour, not moving, not complaining, not checking your phone, not asking anyone to take your place. You just sat there, quiet, steady, patient, like your presence alone could protect her from breaking." Sandra's breath caught and tears filled her eyes again. The woman wiped her cheek. "And when Sandra finally opened the door, you stood up so gently, as if you were afraid she might shatter. I saw the way you looked at her, like you saw her pain even when she tried to hide it." The host's voice shook. "You remember all of that?" The woman nodded. "I do, because I learned something that day, something I never forgot. Keanu's kindness changed Sandra's life, but it changed mine too." Keanu looked stunned, unsure what she meant. The woman's voice steadied. "After watching you that day, I went home and made a promise to myself that I would try to show kindness the same way. Silent, respectful, gentle. I started helping people at work. I volunteered. I listened more. I became more patient with others and with myself." Her voice broke with emotion. "Because of you, you didn't just help Sandra. You changed the way I lived my entire life." Keanu stared at her, overwhelmed. Sandra put her hand on his arm, feeling the storm of emotion rising inside him. The audience wiped tears, moved by the power of a simple act. The woman took a shaky breath. "I just wanted you to know, sometimes kindness doesn't save only one person. Sometimes it saves more people than you can ever imagine. You gave hope without even trying." Keanu finally found his voice, soft and full of sincerity. "I never wanted anything in return," he whispered. "I only wanted people to feel less alone." Sandra squeezed his arm gently. "And that's exactly why the world loves you," she said softly. because you remind us all that kindness is never wasted. The audience rose to their feet, clapping through tears. Not because of fame, but because of the message. The host wiped his eyes and whispered into the microphone, "Maybe this is why millions fell silent when Sandra spoke, because kindness like this still exists." Keanu looked at both women with gratitude and humility, his voice steady but emotional as he said, "We all carry pain. We all carry moments we survive. But if we can lighten someone's load, even for a moment, then we should." And in that moment, the studio lights felt softer, the world felt quieter, and millions watching felt something warm inside their chest. The story wasn't about fame. It was about kindness, and how one gentle act can change more lives than you will ever know.